Whenever you get in your car, have you ever stopped to think about what's actually making it go? It's not just a bunch of gears and metal anymore. It's a seriously complex computer on wheels. Today, we're going to dive into the invisible set of rules that make sure that computer doesn't go haywire. Get this, a modern car is running on more than 100 million lines of code. Yeah, you heard that right. That's way more than a fighter jet, more than the Large Hadron Collider. And this code isn't just for your radio. It's controlling your engine, your steering, and most importantly, all of your safety systems.
So with all that mind-boggling complexity, with all those millions of places something could go wrong, it really makes you wonder, right? What's stopping some tiny software bug from causing a total disaster? How can we possibly trust it? Well, it turns out there's a rulebook for that.
And that rulebook has a name, ISO 26262. The easiest way to think of it is like a global safety language that every single car company on the planet has to speak. It's the international gold standard for making sure the electronics in your car are as safe as they can possibly be.
See, before this standard existed, it was kind of like the Wild West. Every car maker had its own internal safety rules. But as cars got way, way more complex, the industry knew they needed one unified, super robust way of doing things. ISO 26262 became that single source of truth, designed to stop electronic malfunctions from causing any unacceptable risks. Now, this standard isn't just some checklist they run through at the very end. No way. It's a deep, comprehensive process that's involved from the moment an idea is just a sketch on a napkin, all the way to when that car is eventually taken off the road for good. It forces engineers to constantly ask, what could go wrong? How bad could it be? And what are we doing to stop it? Okay, so how does the standard actually figure out what's risky and what's not? This brings us to the absolute heart of ISO 26262, a little acronym called ASIL. Just think of it as a risk score that gets assigned to every single electronic function in the car. So ASIL stands for Automotive Safety Integrity Level, which, is a bit of a mouthful. But what it really means is that it's a formal way to classify risk. This rating tells engineers exactly how strict and careful they need to be when designing and testing a part. The bigger the risk, the higher the ASIL rating, and the tougher the rules get. And here's where it gets interesting. It's all a hierarchy. Right at the top, you have ASIL, D. This is reserved for the most critical systems, stuff like autonomous emergency braking, where a failure would be absolutely catastrophic. Then, as you move down through C, B, and A, the risk gets lower. And all the way at the bottom, you have QM, or quality management. That's for things like your car radio. If it breaks, it's annoying for sure, but it's not going to cause an accident. All right, so this risk score is obviously a huge deal. But where does it come from? How do engineers actually land on an ASIL B or an ASIL D? Well, it's not a gut feeling. It's a very systematic process based on a really logical and pretty simple equation. Yeah, they don't just pull a number out of a hat. They have to analyze every possible failure by looking at it through 3 different lenses. How severe are the consequences? How often is the car in that situation? And can the driver do anything to stop the bad thing from happening? So first up is severity. This one's the most straightforward. It asks a simple, grim question. If this part fails, how badly could people get hurt? It's a scale that goes from S0, which means no injuries at all, up to S3, which means life-threatening or even fatal injuries. Next up, we've got exposure. This is all about how often a car is in the specific operating situation where a failure could cause harm. Think about it. A glitch that can only happen while you're slowly backing into a garage is way less risky than a glitch that could happen while you're merging onto the highway, just because you're in that high-speed situation so much more often. And the third, and maybe the most fascinating factor, is controllability. This one asks, okay, let's say the system fails. Can a normal driver still prevent a crash? So if a warning light comes on and you have a few seconds to pull over, that's pretty controllable. But if the steering just cuts out instantly with 0 warning, well, that is C3, completely uncontrollable. So let's see how this all comes together. Let's take that automatic emergency braking system. If it fails to brake, the severity could easily be S3, fatal. You're in situations where you might need it almost every time you drive, so exposure is a high E4. And if it fails in that split second, there's nothing the driver can do. That's a C3, uncontrollable. So you put it all together, the highest severity, the highest exposure, and the lowest controllability, and bam! The rulebook says this system must be developed to the highest possible standard, ASIL D.
Okay, so we've got our rating ASIL, D. But what does that actually mean for the engineers who are designing the car? How does a letter on a spreadsheet change how that braking system gets built in the real world? And this just shows you how massive the difference is. For a QM feature, like the radio, you follow your normal quality process. But for an ASIL-D feature, like the brakes, oh, it is a completely different universe. We're talking about extreme, painstaking rigor. Every single line of code is scrutinized. You need independent teams to test and verify the work of the main team. And you have to design in redundancies and fail-safes, things like having two processors that are constantly checking each other's math.
And at the end of the day, that's the whole point of this entire standard. It makes sure that safety is woven into the DNA of a system right from day one. It isn't some extra feature you can just bolt on at the end. Safety becomes a core part of the design, just as important as horsepower or looks.
All right, I know we've waded through some pretty technical stuff here, but let's pull it all back to the driver's seat. Why does any of this matter to you when you get behind the wheel?
It matters because this framework is what builds trust. Every time your car's lane assist nudges you back into the lines, or the automatic braking kicks in to prevent a fender bender, you are putting your absolute trust in those millions of lines of code. ISO 26262 is that invisible safety net, that incredibly rigorous process that makes all that trust even possible. And that leaves us with a huge question for the future. We've created this amazing rulebook for cars that have a human driver. But as we race towards fully autonomous cars, cars with no steering wheel, no pedals, no driver, what happens to a factor like controllability? How do you even measure that when there's no human to take control? What will the next safety rulebook have to look like to manage that entirely new level of risk and trust?